She told me not to make her repeat herself, but I couldn't resist saying the one thing that changed everything between us. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, another long lecture in a classroom that always smelled faintly of chalk and old books. The kind of place where words seemed to hang in the air, caught between the dusty light of the ceiling lamps and the quiet shuffle of students turning pages. I sat near the back, not because I wasn't paying attention, but because I liked the view. From there, I could watch her without seeming obvious, the way she moved across the room with a quiet authority, her heels clicking softly against the floor, her voice steady but warm. She was unlike anyone I'd ever known, 40 years old, confident, composed, and yet there was something about her eyes that hinted at a quiet vulnerability, a kind of softness she tried to hide behind her professionalism. Tonight, though, my attention slipped. My pen tapped idly against the desk, and my gaze wandered until her voice snapped through the silence, firm but not unkind. "Don't make me repeat myself." The whole class turned their heads toward me. For a moment, heat flushed my face, but instead of shrinking back, something bold stirred inside me. Maybe it was the way her words wrapped around me, demanding attention. Maybe it was the quiet pull I'd felt for weeks but never dared acknowledge. Either way, the words left my lips before I had time to think. "Then whisper it in my ear." The room froze. A sharp inhale from somewhere in the front row, the scratching of pens halting mid-sentence. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my gaze steady on her. Her eyes widened just slightly, barely enough for anyone else to notice, but I saw it. A flicker of surprise, maybe even something else she didn't want anyone to see. She didn't smile. She didn't scold me. She just stared, lips parting as if a reply lingered on the edge of her breath. Then, as quickly as it came, the moment was gone. She straightened her shoulders, adjusted the papers in her hand, and carried on as though nothing had happened. But I felt it, the shift in the air, the invisible line we had crossed. For the rest of that lecture, her voice was steady, but her eyes avoided mine. And me? I sat there, pretending to take notes, pretending to listen, when in truth all I could think about was the way her words had touched me, and the way mine had touched her. I didn't know it then, but that single exchange, the firmness in her voice, the recklessness in mine, was the spark that would change everything between us. When the final bell rang, the other students packed up in a rush, chairs scraping against the floor, laughter spilling into the hall. I took my time, sliding my books into my bag with deliberate slowness, half hoping she might glance my way again. She didn't. At least not while others were still there. But as the last footsteps faded, her voice called out quietly, carrying just enough firmness to stop me mid-step. "Stay for a moment." I turned, heart quickening. She was still at her desk, the lamplight above softening the stern lines of her face. Her hands rested on a stack of essays, but her eyes, calm and steady, were fixed on me. I walked toward her, trying to appear casual, though the silence stretched between us like a taut string. Finally, she sighed, leaning back in her chair. "You know what you said earlier was inappropriate, don't you?" Her tone wasn't angry. If anything, it was measured, controlled, like she was reminding herself to keep the walls up. I nodded. "I know. I'm sorry if it came across as disrespectful. I hesitated, searching for honesty that didn't sound rehearsed. I just meant that your voice carries weight. I don't want to forget a word you say." Her lips parted slightly, as if the response surprised her. For a second, she seemed caught off guard, then quickly composed herself. She leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. "You're young. Sometimes you don't realize how words can be taken. Not everyone will understand your intentions." I could hear the caution in her voice, the deliberate way she put distance between us. But there was something else too, buried beneath the lecture, a softness, almost like she was speaking more to herself than to me. I held her gaze. I wasn't joking. Her eyes flickered, the faintest trace of warmth breaking through her professional calm. She shook her head lightly, as if to dismiss the thought, but I caught the way her breath hitched before she looked down at her papers again. "Go on," she said, her voice quieter now. "Don't keep me repeating myself twice in one night." I turned toward the door, but as I walked away, I could still feel the weight of her eyes following me. There was no reprimand in them anymore, no irritation, just something unspoken. Something neither of us wanted to admit had already begun. And in that moment, I realized, she wasn't only protecting me. She was protecting herself. The rain came without warning that week. Heavy drops streaked against the tall classroom windows, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and silver. Most students had already rushed out, huddling beneath umbrellas or running to waiting cars. But I stayed behind, watching the storm, grateful for any reason to linger. She was still at her desk, sorting through papers, the soft yellow light of her lamp casting a glow over her shoulders. For once, the usual hum of the building was gone. No footsteps, no voices. Just the steady rhythm of the rain and the faint scratch of her pen. I pulled a chair closer, not too near, but close enough that she noticed. She looked up, her brow lifting. "Shouldn't you be heading home?" I smiled faintly, resting my arms on the desk. "Not in this weather. I'd rather wait it out." She hesitated, then set her pen down. "You'll be waiting a while." The way she said it, soft, resigned, felt less like a warning and more like an invitation. The silence stretched comfortably between us, broken only by the storm outside. For the first time, she didn't seem like the teacher who towered over us with authority. She seemed human. After a pause, she spoke again, her voice lower, more thoughtful. "You know, teaching at this stage in my life isn't what I thought it would be. The older I get, the more I feel like I disappear outside these walls. People stop seeing you. They only see the role you play." Her words hung in the air, delicate and heavy all at once. I leaned forward, trying to catch her eyes. "You're not invisible." Her gaze flickered toward me, doubtful at first, then curious. "You might think people don't notice you," I continued, "but I see you. I notice the way your voice softens when you read poetry aloud. The way you tilt your head when you're deep in thought. The way you care more than you ever admit. You're anything but invisible to me." For a moment, she simply stared at me, and I wondered if I'd said too much. But then, her expression softened. Not quite a smile, not quite sadness, something in between. A look that spoke of walls beginning to crack. The rain drummed harder against the glass, and she leaned back in her chair, her eyes finally leaving mine. Yet I knew she had heard me. More than that, she had felt it. And as I sat there, with nothing but the storm and her silence between us, I realized this was the first time she had let me glimpse the woman behind the teacher. The rain finally cleared a few days later, leaving the air fresh and cool, the kind that carried the faint scent of wet earth. I lingered after class again, under the pretense of needing help with one of the assigned readings. She didn't question it, though I could tell she knew I didn't really need it. Still, she gestured for me to sit across from her, sliding the book toward the space between us. The classroom was quiet, only the ticking clock above the board filling the silence. She leaned forward, pointing at a paragraph with the tip of her pen. Her sleeve brushed the edge of the page, neat and deliberate as always. "Read this part carefully," she said, her voice calm, though I thought I heard the faintest tremor. I bent over the book, tracing the words with my eyes. When I paused, struggling to capture their meaning, her hand moved closer, ready to underline the line for me. And that was when it happened. Her fingers brushed mine. Lightly, almost by accident. Neither of us moved. The warmth of her skin startled me, not because it was unexpected, but because of how deeply I felt it in such a small touch. My breath caught, and I glanced up at her. She was staring at the page, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her lips pressed together, as though willing herself not to react. For a heartbeat, we both stayed there, our hands resting against the same worn page. The contact was delicate, fragile, yet it felt heavier than any words we could have exchanged. Finally, she withdrew, fingers curling slightly as she pulled them back. She cleared her throat, eyes still fixed on the book. "Focus," she said softly, though her voice didn't carry the same steady authority it usually did. I nodded, pretending to continue reading, though the words blurred before me. My hand still tingled where her skin had touched mine, and my mind raced with 100 thoughts I couldn't voice. She leaned back in her chair, keeping a careful distance now. But every so often, I caught her glancing at me, quickly looking away when our eyes almost met. It was as if we'd crossed an invisible boundary neither of us had intended to breach, yet neither of us regretted. The lesson ended soon after, but when I left the room that evening, I carried more than just words from the page. I carried the memory of her touch, light, fleeting, but impossible to forget. And I knew she carried it too. The days that followed were different. She didn't avoid me completely, but the warmth that had begun to slip into her tone was replaced with distance. Her corrections in class grew sharper, her instructions more formal. It was as though she had built the walls back up overnight. And yet, the more she tried to push me away, the more I felt the quiet pull toward her. Every glance, every pause between her words carried something unsaid. One evening, I returned to the classroom long after most of the students had gone. The halls were dim and hushed, the air heavy with the faint scent of floor polish. Her light was still on. She sat at her desk, shoulders curved forward, red pen moving across another stack of essays. The lamplight softened the strands of hair that had slipped from her bun, casting shadows across her face. She looked tired, tired in a way that wasn't just about the work in front of her. I stepped closer. "You should rest," I said gently, placing my bag down on a nearby chair. She didn't look up. "I have too much to do." I reached out, sliding the stack of papers aside, careful not to overstep but firm enough to make her pause. "It'll still be here tomorrow. But you look like you need someone to remind you that you matter more than this work." Her eyes lifted to mine then, sharp with surprise, but softening as they lingered. She opened her mouth as though to argue, then closed it again. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. I sat down beside her, close enough that our shoulders brushed. The contact was subtle but impossible to ignore. She stiffened for a moment, then let out a quiet breath, her posture relaxing as if some invisible weight had lifted. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence carried everything, the hesitations, the longing, the boundaries neither of us wanted to admit were already crumbling. Her hand rested on the desk, fingers curled slightly, not far from mine. I didn't move closer, but I didn't pull away either. The nearness was enough, charged and fragile. Finally, she stood, gathering her papers with deliberate care. "You should go," she said softly, not meeting my eyes. But I heard the crack in her voice. I saw the way her hand lingered for a second longer than it needed to on the desk, as though part of her wanted to stay right there beside me. And as I walked out, the warmth of her shoulder against mine stayed with me, more powerful than any words she had spoken. It was late, far later than usual for me to still be on campus. The building was nearly empty, the echo of my footsteps following me down the quiet hallway. I had stayed behind, struggling through a particularly dense reading assignment. Truth be told, I wasn't sure if it was the text that kept me there, or the quiet hope that she might be too. Sure enough, when I pushed open the classroom door, she was there. Alone again, her desk lamp casting a warm circle of light around her. The rest of the room lay in shadow, the soft hum of the old radiator filling the silence. She looked up, brows lifting when she saw me. "You're still here?" I held up my book, half smiling. "I can't make sense of this passage. Thought maybe you could help." For a moment, I thought she might send me away, keep that careful distance she tried to rebuild. But instead, she motioned for me to sit. "All right. Show me." I slid into the chair beside her, the air shifting with the closeness. She leaned in, her shoulder brushing mine as she guided the book between us. Her hair had loosened again, a strand falling gently along her cheek. I wanted to tuck it behind her ear, but I kept my hands on the page. She lowered her voice as she began to explain, her tone softer than usual, almost as though the words were meant only for me. My eyes flicked from the text to her lips, the shape of each word drawing me in more than the meaning itself. And then, almost without realizing, she leaned closer. Her breath warmed my ear, her words no longer carrying through the room but whispering directly into me. My chest tightened. Time seemed to stop. She paused mid-sentence, realizing just how near she was. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Her eyes flickered to mine, caught in the half-light, and I saw it, the memory of what I had said weeks ago, the playful defiance that had started all of this. Her cheeks flushed, and before she could pull back, she finished her thought in the same hushed whisper, her voice trembling just slightly. I couldn't help it, I smiled. Not teasingly, but softly, letting her see that I remembered. That I understood. She turned away quickly, gathering her papers, as if the world might collapse if she stayed too close. But the damage, or maybe the miracle, was already done. She had whispered. And I knew it wasn't just the lesson she had given me that night. It was the answer to mine. The term was ending. The classroom that had once felt like a secret world now stood half empty, its shelves bare where students had returned their books, its walls stripped of posters. It was strange, how quickly time had passed, how every moment with her had carved itself into memory. That night, I lingered again, waiting until the last of my classmates had disappeared into the cool evening. She stood by the doorway, one hand on the frame as though hesitating to leave. The golden light from the hallway spilled across her face, softening her features. She looked different. Not the sharp, untouchable teacher I had first known, but a woman caught between endings and beginnings. I walked toward her, my footsteps slow, my heart heavy with the thought that this might be goodbye. She turned at the sound, her expression composed, but her eyes gave her away. There was something fragile in them, something she couldn't hide from me anymore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, thick with all the words we hadn't said, all the boundaries we had danced around. Finally, I broke it. My voice was low, careful, as though the air itself might shatter. If I promise to listen the first time, I said, will you still whisper to me sometimes? Her lips parted in surprise, then curved into the faintest smile, soft, private, meant only for me. She shook her head lightly, but the way her eyes lingered on mine told me she wasn't denying what we both felt. She stepped closer, so close I could feel the faint warmth of her presence. Her hand rose, hesitated, then rested gently against my chest. The weight was light, but steady, the kind of touch that spoke more than words could. I felt my breath catch, not from the touch itself, but from the meaning behind it. Only if you stay close, she whispered. The words barely carried beyond the space between us, but they sank deep into me. My heart pounded beneath her palm, as if trying to answer her without sound. For a long moment, we just stood there, her hand against me, my eyes locked on hers. No one else around. No rules. No masks. Just her and me, bound together in a quiet understanding neither of us would forget. When she finally pulled away, it wasn't with the finality of an ending. It was with the warmth of a promise, one whispered softly, meant to last beyond this room, beyond this moment. And as I walked out into the night, I realized the story between us hadn't ended at all. It had only just begun.